find you. And I will kill you.
I'm the Walton. Shut the fuck up, Donnie.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. Aren't you?
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
Just been revoked.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
I want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! Because it is my name!
I see, Dave.
Today, Junior?
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? What?
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
You like scary?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary?
The price is wrong, bitch.
Welcome to Critics Not Cynics, the podcast that tries to prove that you can be a critic without being a cynic. And as usual, whenever I start a show, I hit the wrong key to not have it start as smoothly as I would like it to. So, welcome back to the show. I know we took a week off. It was kind of unplanned, but planned at the same time. I don't want to take next week off, but we might have to take next week off just because there's some stuff happening next Friday night that might impact whether or not I'm going to want to stream. And before I forget, because I forgot to announce it last week and really beat myself up afterwards, we have a giveaway to announce. A digital copy of Spider-Man No Way Home, 4K digital copy, will be up for grabs, but it's not just for free completely. We would like for you to share the podcast out on social media, primarily our YouTube, because that's how we'll be announcing it. We'll be live either next week or the week after. Subscribe to the channel, comment, and so anyone who does all of those things will be entered in automatically. Now, I do have to say this will be for U.S. people only, so only because I know the code will most likely only be redeemable in the States, since that's where we're located. But just wanted to make sure I announced it this week. And just in general, just, if you wouldn't mind sharing out the podcast, it always will help grow, and it's free, so we don't ask anything really for this. You see, I got a new mic and paid that out of my own pocket. So, like I said, always trying to improve and upgrade as much as we can, and we do it pretty much on our own dime. So any support by sharing it out to your friends and families, greatly appreciated. I know I hate saying it every time, but it's just that wonderful YouTube jazz. So this week, we are going to be talking about episodes 5 and 6 of Picard and episodes 1 and 2 of Moon Knight. And if anything else kind of comes up, we'll talk about it. But I figured, let's get the kind of not so great talk out of the way, meaning Picard.
Picard.
I assume we're on the same page. We really both haven't talked about it since we've watched it, because I watched them before you did, and I know you just got them watched recently. And I watched episode 6 last night, and I was like, "Ooh, boy." So let's dive into that topic right now. So episode 5, I'm pulling it up here as we speak because I'm always not prepared as well, was titled Fly Me to the Moon. So Picard discovers an important person from his past may be integral to the divergence in the timeline. Q continues his manipulation of the timeline. We get introduced to Dr. Adam Soong, and Seven and Rafi do their thing. That's pretty much the episode.
I was like, that's pretty much all that happens in the episode. I mean, it's typical Star Trek fare in that we have the setup and then we execute the plan, going into like the situation. I think a lot about like that DS9 episode when they go into the VIX, and stuff like it. Or what's the one based on the book in Next Generation? I can't remember the title of that episode.
Oh, yeah.
Worf and Geordi and Riker all end up in that casino, and it's a book. I mean, it's very typical Star Trek fare, so it's not like completely out of like left field or anything like that. It's a very, very standard Star Trek episode.
Yeah, this one out of the two, I don't have as much issue with. It's more that 6 is kind of more of the same. So like, yeah, this episode, like it does what it needs to do to kind of give us more of clues of what's happening with the timeline. That we get, the Watcher, which makes a reference to an episode of the original series that I'm trying like my hardest to remember because the name Gary Seven like is familiar to me, but I don't specifically remember like what season and what episode that was. But it still doesn't explain everything for me. And I'm fine with like Renee Picard being kind of the reason the timeline diverges because it's Q and Q messes with Picard. So like it's apropos.
That it's a Picard.
That it's a Picard and it's a monumental Picard. Introducing the Dr. Soong stuff is a mixed bag for me as well, especially having the actress who plays Soji playing his daughter in this as well. The good point is it's establishing that connection of why Soong in the future would design Soji that way. But outside of the eugenics part of it, because we know the eugenics wars is a pretty big part of the Star Trek lore and history, it didn't do a whole lot for me. It's just like kind of obvious manipulation is obvious type of stuff going on with that. But yeah, this episode, like, again, it kind of just fills some gaps, moves the story a little bit further. There's not really like this is why it's kind of hard to talk about, and just wanted to kind of get it out of the way because I figure we'll probably end up spending more time discussing Moon Knight.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to look up that
fine.
episode. I mean, it's Assignment Earth, but I was trying to like look up something to like refresh my memory on it,
Yeah, because it's just one of those ones where it's like, yeah, I know it, but
yeah, but I don't. It's not right at the tip of my mind. I was trying to find like a picture or something. Like it's season 2, episode 26, and I'm just trying to like look at pictures.
Let's see if I can.
Assignment Earth. I mean, it just says they encounter a guy.
Okay, so it was played by Robert Lansing. Let's go ahead.
But I'm really just not. It's not like coming straight to mind.
Even looking at the picture of him, I'm like, okay. Like I vaguely remember. This is from the actual image from the episode. I don't know why they did a Doctor Who edit there, but they did. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and definitely like rewatch that episode because
yeah,
it maybe it'll help me understand some more of what's going on there because again, okay, that's fine that you're making that connection, but you don't explain the Laris connection.
I feel like that's just like a typical Star Trek thing though of like let's just use the people we have. Just kind of like Soji's playing his daughter and stuff. Like, just these are the cast members that we have. We'll just use them.
Yeah, but like Soji makes more sense because of the connection. Whereas this Watcher, like even Picard says himself, he's like, well, you're not Romulan, so you can't really be a distant ancestor.
Right.
So,
excuse me.
You know, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you wanted to have that kind of heart tug pull on Picard, but you haven't given us an explanation, maybe with next week's episode, which is, again, they're doing the thing I didn't want them to do, is they're spending way too much time here in the past.
Yeah, it is starting to feel like, okay, we've been here for like, it feels like 5 episodes. Has it been? It's maybe been 4?
It's been since episode 3. So
so it's only been 3.
We're at 3.
It feels like we've been there a little too long.
Right. And,
this is where, like I said, last season felt like they took one really good episode and pulled it apart, and you got all the good meat in between. This feels like them trying to do that same thing and failing, because it's just the slow filler stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's like it feels really kind of disconnected and disjointed, because there's not really been too much like interaction between Q and Picard. Because even when
yeah, that's the best part, is when Q's on screen.
Not only is it the best part, it's characteristic, right? So every time Q messes with Picard, he gloats in his face, like every single time, multiple times, annoying the living shit out of him, just because that's who Q is. And instead, we're seeing a Q kind of without his powers, but
ish.
He still has them, but he doesn't have them fully, which is why he involves Dr. Soong. But that doesn't seem characteristic for Q. That's the problems I'm having with these last 2 episodes, is characteristically being uncharacteristic.
I'm not sure what's going on with Q, just because I was trying to remember the last time that we had seen him, and I feel like it was Voyager,
right?
But in that trial, and the being allowed to die, but I don't know why being allowed to die automatically means they all age. I need some kind of explanation, because if they're just gonna go, oh well, now he's getting old, it's kind of like.
Well, I don't even know if it's the aging thing, because the aging thing he did for Picard, and he's just having to stay that way.
He's having
he looks
a little crazed, and he's having some issues. I feel like they're gonna say he's aging, whatever that means for a Q,
Right. So it's just one of those things where it's like, now we're in the second half of the season, and we're getting to the point where we have 4 episodes left, and much like with Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's like, are you going to be able to wrap up all of these plot lines satisfactorily for us within these 4 episodes? Because when we just basically talked about episode 5. Rafi and Seven break Rios out.
I'm glad they didn't waste any more time with that, though. Yeah. They kind of break them out and they're gone.
Right. And then we have more of, again, this is something we said at the very beginning when we started reviewing this season. They're doing the Girardi double agent again, because they expound more on the Borg stuff. And then, Borg Queen manages to do what the Borg Queen was going to do, which we all knew she was going to do. And then she, begins to assimilate her, but then pass it off that, oh no, Girardi just killed the Borg Queen. And then when we get to the end of the episode, when they begin their Ocean's 11 type heist, that the Borg Queen is with Girardi, and that she did in fact begin to assimilate her.
Yeah, again, the whole slowness with the assimilation process seems really strange to me, just because they've shown it before as being a little faster.
So I agree, but I have to give them some credit, because when we get to episode 6, they do some explanation. It's not
a little bit.
It's not great. It doesn't completely. And of course, the sun decides to finally come out all day, so that's why my green screen's messing up. But they at least try to come up with an explanation, even though it's completely not satisfactory. That's that's the reason why. But the stress, her stress hormones or whatever, her anxiety, which is counter because usually it was when the prey was weaker and more in fear or stressed out that assimilation took over quicker.
Yeah,
but
fast. Yeah.
This time it's only your happy thoughts.
Your endorphins. Yeah.
Or maybe it's different for the queen as a queen mechanic.
Maybe it's different because she's been removed from her body and in that tube thing for a while or something. I don't know. It just kind of seems. And the whole thing of like not even bothering to. I mean, if she had that tentacle thing. Yeah. And she could assimilate. She didn't try the ship. She didn't go out and assimilate that guy and then have him inject tubules into Girardi. Like, there's just so much there that I feel like I don't really feel like we're utilizing her the way that we could. I don't know.
Well, and again, they're doing the thing that they did in the first season. Again, making Girardi kind of the double agent. It's like we saw this, and it was fine last season, but we don't need to rehash it again.
Yeah, and completely do it again. Yeah.
Because now when we get, and that's the other issue I had with episode 6, because episode 6 just kind of continued on. They're trying to prevent Q's manipulation from driving Renee out of the Europa project, which was what we assumed the Europa mission was going to be the thing that was going to be where the divergence was. And then, we get the exposition that Renee is the reason why, because she discovers a life form and so on and so forth. But like it's just a continuation of it. But when I looked at the runtime at the very beginning, I'm like, 38 minutes? Like, and it's one of those ones where it's in media res, so you've got the countdown, so you jump at the beginning, at the end of the episode technically, and then you walk backwards, and it like there's nothing really wrong with the episode outside of it's just too short. It's again just kind of spending way too much time in the past. I will say, however, though, the scene between Picard and Renee was really good. Like, I really liked the writing there. I really liked how they approached the subject of fear and overcoming it, and what, how to really kind of not let that anxiety kind of control you, which is a really good message and a really good scene. But again, like, it's just Dr. Soong is doing his thing for Q so he can save his daughter. Then you add the subplot of, oh wait, the daughter's a clone, which, it was like red flags that it was going to be a clone, so it was obvious. But ultimately it just leaves us there in that cliffhanger of, okay, now the Watcher is going to enter Picard's mind. They don't want them to enter Picard's mind. Yeah.
Girardi, Borg Queen, is walking into where are they? San Francisco or wherever it is they are.
Los Angeles. But yeah, they're just. It's like it just feels so disjointed with all the different plot lines.
It's another one that kind of feels like they haven't made up their minds, like you've talked about before about runtimes, that if this episode and last episode should have all been one, right? And they didn't know where to cut it, and they're kind of like, well, we've got this other stuff that we're going to do, and this is just kind of, but it really is. It's really basically one episode essentially.
And I would totally agree with that. Like, if this had been a part of episode 5, I'd be like, okay, it's fine. Like, I wouldn't have as much issue with it because it does feel like it's just because. Again, where it ends with them entering the gala and then Girardi getting arrested and, oh, it's the Borg Queen. And then you literally reopen almost right there. Like, you have your little bit with Picard and then you jump to 34 minutes before or whatever. And then it's literally her at the end of the last episode, the Borg Queen going, oh, getting captured, such a good plan. Like, that there's no reason for that. It's very sloppy, and it left for this kind of cutting floor episode where it's like you could have cut this episode out completely. Quite frankly, like there's.
I mean, you could have. There's a bunch you could have chopped up, and it would have been like one episode of 45-minute track.
Right. Exactly. So it was just kind of like I put in the description or the title of today's live stream. It's like it's just dragging at this point. Like it doesn't want to pick up.
They've brought up, like you said about plot points, though. They've sparked my interest in things that I'm like, are you gonna do this in 4 episodes? Because now I'm thinking like somehow this Dr. Soong's gonna be involved with the eugenics war that's about to happen. You know, why is he have all of these clones? You know, obviously, because then I'm thinking they're like, well, it's 2024, and I'm like, well, I guess technically somebody could clone a person. I mean, we've cloned enough animals and stuff, and you know, because when he has that drone shade thing out to shade her from the sun and stuff, I'm just thinking about like 4 years from now, you know, the technology that they're like, this is what will be in 4 years, you know.
Well, is it 2024 or 2044? I can't remember.
I thought they said 2024.
We will do a quick check on that.
A quick search, because that's what I thought that they said.
Let's see.
Because pretty soon
no, you are correct. 2024. Okay.
Yeah, for this timeline, pretty soon we have to go into World War III,
right? To
come out of it and be in that dark age sort of thing, and then Cochrane can go and you know, do the warp flight for the Vulcans to see in this universe.
Yes, exactly.
But they've just brought up these little things now that I'm like, we're either going to end up staying here for the entirety of the season, and at the end of the season we will get out. That I'm just kind of like, well, it's not really what I wanted to spend a whole season basically in the past.
So, because there's not much else to really talk about the episodes, but let's talk about the more interesting thing that kind of came out this week about Picard. Because much like we had said, we didn't want this to run on for like 7 years, because you have to run into the risk that Patrick Stewart may pass away at some point during that time. They did say that season 3 is going to be the final season. I am completely fine with that. And I like the fact, since it was in the announcement, I would play the trailer, but they'd hit us with a copyright claim, that the entire cast of Next Generation will be back. So we'll have Riker, we'll have Geordi, we'll have Troy, we'll have Crusher. And we'll have Worf, which is the big one that I think most people have kind of been wanting to see, especially with the differentiation between how Klingons are in Discovery versus how they are or were in Next Generation. So it'll be interesting to see if they go back with the traditional style. But I'm starting to wonder at this point in the season that the outcome of how this season ends is going to directly impact what season 3 is going to be about.
Yeah, it almost feels like 2 and 3 are probably going to be like, could have been one big long season.
Right. And I also have to wonder, because they have not obviously announced a release date yet for it, but it's really early to release a teaser for a new season. And I get it, they did it for First Contact Day, which is okay. Like maybe they just wanted to do that as part of the celebration. But I am inclined to think that we will probably start getting it by the end of this year. Just as a means to kind of finish everything and wrap it all up. And it almost appears that they've already had filming done and maybe are wrapping it up as we speak. Who knows? And again, I would be fine with that, especially if season 2 leaves us on a cliffhanger, you know, where we're kind of left wondering what is going to be the actual outcome. How is this going to end? Because it seems like season 3 is going to be a lot about legacy. So we'll really see how this kind of wraps up. But there's really, like, I was so kind of disappointed in these 2 weeks of episodes. Again, not so much by episode 5, but just really kind of episode 6 kind of retroactively hurt episode 5 because of its short run time and the fact that we are still setting here in the past. And my guess is 8 or 9 is when we're going to finally be back in the present.
I don't even know if we're gonna do it. I think they're gonna pull it out to the very last episode.
Could be. Could very
because
well be.
Next episode is definitely gonna be it's probably gonna jump back and forth between Talon or whatever her name is, Laris basically, in Picard's mind, and we're seeing those images that we keep getting pieces of with his mom.
Right.
We're going to jump between that and whatever chaos that Borg Queen Girardi is going to be doing.
Right.
And whatever our team is going to be either be split or like some of them are going to try and tackle that issue. Maybe they won't even know what's going on and we'll spend the majority of our time in Picard's mind. But I feel like that's where we're going to spend the majority of our time. That'll be a whole episode at least.
Yeah. And
so
that could very well be 2 episodes.
That's check 1. We're still in the past.
Right.
Yeah. And like you said, it could be 2. So that could be potentially 2 more. And we have, 10?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's like, I think it's going to pull all the way out to the last episode.
Could very well.
And then them coming back, it's going to be the kickoff and into season 3.
I'm also a little, because again, this is something that they're not doing a really good job addressing, is Rafi seeing Elnor. Whether it's, because like on the bus scene, it made sense that it was her mind filling in the blanks. But at the gala, it was just, there was no one there. Like, it wasn't even a random person that kind of had long black hair. So, is there something going on there? Or is it just, again, her inability to overcome that grief? They're not doing a good job of answering that. Or even just tackling on it being her grief, because she could be talking to Seven going, hey, I'm seeing him everywhere I go, everywhere I turn. This is why I'm on edge. Because, you want to have that relationship between Rafi and Seven, and Rafi was the one who appeared to be more open out of the two, because that was kind of her whole issue with Seven, was she was closed off because of her connections with Borg, and of course now I'm really freezing out because of that sun.
Teleporting.
But it's really weird and inconsistent with the fact that they're just really not trying to address some of the plot points, some of the story points. Like even we get to the clinic where they take Picard to get worked on, because they know it's the place they can go without going to a hospital. And there's no talk between the doctor and Rios about, well, wait a minute, last time I saw you were at a detention center. Like, now you're in a tux. What's going on here? I mean, they show that she's kind of apprehensive about it, but they don't even have a scene between the two of them. So
well, and they totally explain it away as she's just apprehensive and I got to go back home to my son.
Right.
But
like they just kind of like, okay, she's done with the scene. Let's go. Let's get rid of her. So I guess score wise, I would give episode 5 like a 3.5. But I'd give episode 6 like 2.5. I hate to come up really kind of harsh on it, but that's really how kind of disappointed I was in these 2 episodes.
I don't know. I feel like still that it's like one big fat episode that it could have just,
well, it would have improved it for sure.
I'm just trying to. I don't know if I feel like it quite deserves a 3, but not as quite as low as we do 2.8, 2.9.
You like to break our rules with our grading system.
It's just this season really to me is feeling like a bingeable season where if they had released them all at once, we could have just swept through all 10 episodes and that would have been it and that would have been over.
Right.
Very easy to watch back to back to back. Whereas last season did feel very much there's the mystery and I'm excited for the next episode and what's coming and I'm getting into it. And this is just kind of if I don't watch them, I'll just binge them all and it's fine. It's not really drawing me in the same way. I don't know if they had a change in writers.
No, I think it's about the same writers on there.
I don't know if they didn't plan out the story. I don't know what's going on. But part of what I do wonder for season 3 is if they're going to end it with everybody still alive, or if they are going to allow Picard to die at the end of season 3.
At this point, as much as I would hate it, I think you have to kill him. I think you have to.
I don't know.
Not like, oh, he has to die in battle or anything like that, but I do think, especially when he makes the point of legacy in the teaser trailer and he's writing the note, I think this is his last hurrah. He goes out with glory, and his like, I think you end with a funeral with everyone there.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, I can see that.
Just to kind of give it its end cap, because there's really, outside of books, there's really no other way that you can continue the Picard story.
Yeah, you'd have to recast, and people would throw a huffy, hissy fit.
I would. I don't typically, but in this instance, I would. Because
he's
he's so iconic in the role.
The only way I would be okay with any kind of Picard offshoot would be if it was like if they did one of those, like the Rascals episode, where it's like he's a kid again, he's 12 years old, and we go kind of like that way.
Yeah, you could always do a young Picard.
I don't want them to do that. I'd rather they just go ahead and let him die.
Or if you can somehow. Because, it's hard for him because he's never had kids, but if you somehow had somewhere that there was a relative or...
Well, his one son, but I guess he died, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did, because he had the heart thing as well.
Yeah.
And then there was, of course, his clone, played by Tom Hardy, if you believe that. But yeah, it's just one of those ones where it's like, I'd rather you end it with his death, give him a good send-off, and have everyone there for it, because that's the only way you can do it. Now, everybody...
Yeah, the only person... Well, I was going to say the only person that can't be there is Data.
But... So, I know... Okay, that's a very interesting subject, because I like what Brent Spiner did, which was he specifically had in his contract, I think, for season 2, with, like, no more Data. Right? Because, they wrapped that story up. And I thought they wrapped it up very well in season 1. But when you look at that teaser, you have dialogue from Data. And I think all of the dialogue that plays in that is recorded from that season. It's not sound clips from prior stuff. So I think Data will be there in some form or manner, but like not physically there. I don't think you'll have a physical version of him, but the fact that Brent Spiner is still going to be involved, and I kind of like the fact that he is involved and has been involved with all 3 seasons. It's kind of nice that they managed to find ways to still use him. Outside of the character of Data. So I really do like that and appreciate that. Even to the extent like where, we never saw Dr. Soong in Next Generation, so that when we got to see him in Picard, it like was a nice kind of connection of why Data and Lore and before all looked like him. Like there's that nice connectivity. And again, going back to the Soji thing, like it makes sense why Soji looks like Soji because of the daughter stuff going on in 2024. So, but yeah, I do like that they're going to wrap it up. Hopefully they'll give us a satisfying ending, and maybe, because like this is the one thing we could say about Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like Falcon and Winter Soldier wasn't going to be multi-seasonal. Yes, they've announced that they're having a movie, but like everything that they kind of set up plot point wise and stuff like that wasn't addressed, and we didn't know if it would be addressed, and I highly doubt it will be addressed in Captain America 4. Whereas at least with this, okay, we may not be too thrilled with the fact that they spend 95% of this season in the past, but whatever happens here will be a driving force for season 3 and the finale. So at least there's prospect that this might redeem itself.
Yeah, and I do always, like I've said before, I like when, I know it's counterintuitive to the TV industry, but I like when you plan for the end.
Right.
And you know where you're going to go, because I feel like you have better story for it than when you just keep on going season after season after season after season with something, and it's just kind of like, what are you even doing anymore? Like, what haven't you done?
Right. You know, shows that kind of, like, one show that had that planned was Arrow. They planned for 5 years. Of course, not all of what was in that 5 years was great, but after you get past 5 years, quality really goes down. And then you look at a show like Lost didn't, and then all of a sudden it was kind of imposed, and then they're like, well, crap, we said we're ending it in 6 seasons. How are we going to fit all these multitude of storylines and speculation and theories that everyone's been having and satisfactorily end it by season 6? Especially when you had a writer's strike in the midst of that, that really left a shortened season, and even your season 6 got kind of cut by X amount of episodes. So I agree. I kind of like that. At least if you know you're going to do, let's say, 10 seasons, you can plan for those 10 seasons. Just give yourself that as your get-go. Go 10 seasons, this is how we see the story. But then plan that you might have to end it at season 4 or season 5.
Yeah.
You know, figure out how to adjust the storyline at that point in the event that your show might get canceled. Because, again, that was kind of like Smallville. Smallville was, okay, high school, Clark Kent. Oh, crap, we got past high school.
Right.
And now we're going to spend 1 year in college, and then we're just going to do Superman. Like, that's basically kind of, we're going to do Superman without saying he's Superman, was pretty much the plan afterwards. So
yeah,
that's where I got to give him a lot of credit, at least, even though I'm not too thrilled with what we currently got. And another example, actually, is also the MCU shows. As we get to talk about like Moon Knight and stuff like WandaVision and Hawkeye, even Loki, even though Loki is getting a second season, these shows that they kind of planned one season for the most part, have told pretty satisfactory stories, with knowing that they had a start point and an end point in X amount of episodes. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing at least I do have to give them credit for Picard, because I would have been upset to hear, oh yeah, it's already renewed for season 4 now, and be sitting there going, are you sure he's even going to be around? Like, I love him to death and I don't want him to go, but and it's evident in the show he's older. You know, he can't keep doing it forever. So it's the sad fate of time, sad reality of time. But all right, let's move over to, I think,
Switch.
What is going to be the more interesting of our two topics. And since they were nice enough not to hit us with anything, we're going to go ahead and have that on loop. At least yet.
I was going to say we might find out different this time.
But all right, Moon Knight episodes 1 and 2. So to talk a little bit about Moon Knight, there's a couple things you need to understand about the character of Mark Spector, or Stephen Grant in this case. Something you may not know going into this show that might confuse you, or at least hopefully when we talk about it, might help make sense kind of what's going on to an extent. Mark has DID, dissociative identity disorder. And so he has, now in the show we've only really seen 2, but I can't remember exactly how many in the comics he has had, but it is made for interesting storylines. So this kind of just, especially episode 1, the goldfish problem, kind of just jumps into it, right?
Yeah.
We get introduced to Steven, And I know if you go back to one of the podcast episodes, I was very critical from the trailer, the voice that Oscar Isaac was doing. It sounded really odd and weird. I will say that actually within the show itself, it sounds a lot better. So that like what we heard in a trailer like this is not exactly. I don't. It's weird to kind of describe it, but it's not exactly as weird as it sounds in the trailer. It sounds a lot more natural and a lot more organic. But he is the avatar for Khonshu, an Egyptian god. I don't know the complete lore of him, but that's kind of who he is. Yes, he's like Batman. They've openly in the comics have made jokes to kind of, tongue in cheek that he's kind of the Marvel's Batman. But again, that dissociative identity disorder adds a little bit more character to him in the sense of that's where it's different, right? One kind of criticism I had about this episode, or about the show, not the episode, was the mentality that what drew Oscar and Ethan Hawke to the project was it was going to be kind of disconnected from the MCU. And when you tell me that with anything that's, owned by Marvel and is a part of Marvel, I don't like it. So I think that's really really risky to do because it can alienate your audience before your show even starts. Thankfully, though, and I did catch it in episode 2. I don't know if you caught it, but the director did come out and say there are connections. They're just not going to be in-your-face connections. And that's where I'm perfectly fine. You don't need Avengers showing up in the show. You don't need, Peter Parker swinging through the screen by, for a half a second or something like that. Just as long as you have those references that are out there, that's all I really need to show that it is still in the same world and same reality.
Right.
But so yeah, Steven, he's a gift store.
At a museum, gift shop at a museum.
Yep. And
clerk, I guess.
yeah, clerk is right, and he's thinks he has a sleeping disorder, which is one thing I'm going to have to point out, not as a criticism. It's as a thing for someone who has this issue. They might be thinking they're thinking all the steps through, but they're not. And he's mild-mannered. He's kind of shy. He's got a sleeping issue. But one day, wakes up in the Alps or something and deals with a bird head talking to him. And then has what really is great from this episode is the choreography and the cinematography. In the instances when Khonshu is telling him to let Mark take control and yelling at Mark to take control of the body, and how it shifts. We get this kind of flutter within the screen, and all of a sudden Steven's holding a gun and like not knowing what just happened.
Yeah.
It's a really cool way to present that type of disorder on screen. Because that's the type of discombobulation and confusion that someone with that type of disorder would have. But I've talked enough. I'm going to go ahead and let you say some words about this first episode.
I'm trying to separate the episodes in my head, but
yeah.
I mean, we start with Steven's perspective, which is a good place to start. I mean, yeah, we could have started with like Mark, but this is the much more interesting way to introduce him, especially because I think they are, like we have said with like Phase 4, we're getting into characters that people don't know,
right?
Like as well as like, oh yeah, Iron Man and Thor and Captain America, like. You either are a comics fan to know who Moon Knight is. I know like nothing. Everything I know about him, I'm getting from here, and I'm not Googling. I'm just Like, because I'm afraid to Google. I don't want to spoil myself on something that they might plan to use.
Right.
You know? So I want to stay away from that. But right now, I keep coming up with more questions about his character that I'm kind of like, I wonder this. I wonder that. Like, I mean, he's obviously like a something, like 40-something, I don't know, year-old man. And Mark has been a mercenary for a while. So I'm like, how long has Steven been around? But the mom doesn't answer when he calls. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of confused, and I know it's I don't want to like upset anybody, but I'm like, who was there first? You know, like with the personalities, like, because I don't, again, it's like, it's also a mental disorder I don't know anything about, and we're obviously in fantasy land too.
Right.
But I'm like, obviously I feel like Steven had to at least be there when Mark made this deal, because he kind of mentions it in the next episode, in episode 2. He's like, you said he wouldn't be a problem when I made this deal. So it's like, well, he obviously had Steven there, like he knows about him, but not the other way around. So I'm like, how did he get an apartment? Like, how does this work? And he's just like, well, I'll just live here and just have my Go thing, weird storage locker, whatever. Like, there's so many questions I have about like just him that it's like I'm not even like Moon Knight is like the third character that I'm kind of like, I'm so interested. I need you to explain, you know, how long has this been going on? And because Mark's married, they've been on adventures, they've been hunting things down. He's got a history that's of a mercenary. Like, he's been doing stuff, whereas Steven seems very like forgettable he's a forgettable person, and it's kind of like he at least studied Egyptology, I guess, and the hieroglyphics and stuff, but what else has he really done? Do the parents know? Is that why they don't answer? I don't know. Like, I have so many questions about him that I'm like, oh yeah, the story's interesting too, but I want more character development. I want to know more about what's going on.
So you bring up what I think is actually a story technique that they're trying to do. They want to put you, the viewer, in Steven's shoes.
Because he's so confused.
Yeah, they want you to feel his level of confusion, frustration, anxiety, and questioning. As for who was first, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, Mark, I think, is first. I think Mark is who he is. I would say that somewhere around the time that he made the deal is probably when it developed.
Well, because that was another question. Sorry to cut you off, but it's like, because obviously, again, like, we're in fantasy land,
right?
So again, not wanting to offend anybody who has this disorder or knows people in reality, but in fantasy land, this is like, did this happen because of his deal with an Egyptian moon god?
Right.
You know, like, and he did not have this disorder before, and now he's developed it. Like, because to me, it kind of seems like he already had it. It was already there.
Could be. And it very well maybe, but honestly, what could have happened, because we don't know how long he's been Moon Knight, right? So
right,
we have an idea that it's been some time, obviously because of his adventures with Layla, but we don't know what that time frame is. So it could be that. Because he makes a very interesting point in episode 2. He has a line of dialogue about there was a wall that kind of separated them, and then the stronger of the personalities was who was in control of the body. So let's say, okay, he had it prior to his deal, but making the deal is what weakened it, which could be then why he told Khonshu, hey, it ain't going to be a problem. I have these other personalities because of the fact that, I've been able to control it. And then as soon as the deal happens, that's when the wall breaks. As for like whose apartment, my guess is, it is Mark's. He has it for Steven, and then the storage unit is his when he's in control, or when he needs to to get ready to go. One kind of complaint I have at the moment, but again, we're early days with this, so it's going to change. I want to understand Harrow more, because that's really where episode 1 opens up is, and we don't see his face, but we kind of know by later
Mr. Glass Shoes.
Right. And that's the thing, the breaking of the glass, the what I mean, I know it's like it serves a purpose. There is because I know that this is the thing that people have done. So I don't know why you would do it, but whatever. But I want to know more about him because again, not to jump too far ahead into episode 2, but they really do have some very interesting dialogue together, which is what this show is doing right versus something like Picard is. It sets Harrow up as more of a mystery and just a straight up like kind of bad guy, but yet he seems gentle and kind of nice and apologetic for the old lady. But when we get to episode 2, we understand more of what his rationale is, but what his connection is to Khonshu.
Yeah, and that's also something I have a question about. Right,
so it's unfurling this mystery, I think, at a decent pace, whereas like something like Picard is just like, throw that there. If we get to it, we get to it. So that's what it feels like in Picard right now. But the one thing I kind of wanted to point out, and this is going on to why like I think Mark is the more dominant one, the one who's been around more, because Steven thinks he's got this elaborate plan figured out to stop his sleepwalking. He's got the sand poured around the bed. He's got the tape on the door. He's got himself basically tied to a post. The thing is, Mark knows about that. Mark replaces the tape,
right?
Replaces the sand, and gets him back, tied into bed. So it's one of those things when he starts kind of questioning stuff. It's like, wouldn't you kind of think, well, maybe just because it's all nice and perfect, maybe something else is going on there? And that's not, again, it's not a criticism. It's that kind of him coming to learn that he has another personality.
Because he doesn't pay attention to those signs. And I don't know if it's because he doesn't want to or what, because you see when he does wake up and he takes the tape off the door, there's a lot of tape on the trash can. And it's like, maybe that was that the amount of tape that was in your trash can before? Maybe, kind of realize that there's more tape there.
Right.
I don't know.
So the central mystery that episode 1 sets up is, of course, the Scarab. We don't know the purpose of the Scarab. We know Arthur Harrow wants the Scarab and is tracking Steven down. We learn that there's basically a new Hydra, in a sense, with everyone that's kind of a part of this Amet cult.
This cult, basically, not really a Hydra, it's a cult.
Well, but it's
Hydra was a cult.
Hydra was a cult, and Hydra was everywhere, right? Like, you didn't know who was Hydra until they said, "Hail Hydra." You don't know who these guys are until you see the scales.
The tattoo,
which is great for Egyptian mythology, because the scales, the scales represent, so that's how you're judged about whether you're worthy to move on to the underworld. And if your heart weighs the same as a feather, you've lived life without sin and without hurting people. So Amet and Khonshu deliver out justice differently. Amet is pre-judgment, so Minority Report. And Hydra.
Winter Soldier.
And Khonshu is post, normal. Like, once you've committed the crime, then you should be punished. Which is, again, comes to that kind of interesting dynamic. A dynamic we've kind of seen within Black Panther. When you look at Killmonger's kind of philosophy and T'Challa's philosophy. So it's a really interesting dynamic that I think that the show's going to do a really good job talking about. He obviously gets tracked down to the museum, and he has the jackals chase him, and this is where we get to see Mark talk to him for the first time, which looks kind of weird. I don't know if it's just an effect with all the mirrors and what they were shooting. It looks a little odd, but nothing to really complain too much about. And then we end with him in kind of a quick shot in the suit beating the Jackal. Anything else that you want to talk about with episode 1?
No, I'm thinking because as the trailers moved, I feel like a lot of the trailers episode 1.
Episode 1 and a smidge of 2?
Yeah. But so for anybody who's worried about spoilers through that, it's basically episode 1, a little bit of 2, and there's like I've seen a couple of scenes that I think are from later, but
yeah.
I mean even like that scene's the episode 1, you know, like he's this is like they did a really good job with the trailer of like not giving away a ton.
Right. So episode 2 pretty much just picks up right where we left off. You know, he wakes up and then comes to work and there's you know, them fixing the bathrooms from the fight.
You vandalized the toilet.
Now this is the moment where I think it was no it's later on, but I'll talk about the connection with the greater MCU. Did you catch the GRC logo on the double-decker bus?
Oh, on the no, I wasn't looking at the bus.
So that's kind of nice. It's one of those things that tells me, okay, we're post-Endgame, we're in this world, you know. So that's they didn't have to explain anything. It was just like, oh, hey, Falcon and Winter Soldier right there. So this episode is a lot more kind of him coming to the realization he has another personality. He discovers the locker room or the storage room, has the conversation with Mark, meets Layla, ends up with detectives he should have never let in. I mean, it's Steven. Like that's the great thing too, is the dynamic Oscar Isaac is able to bring to Mark being this kind of Jason Bourne, you know, hard, gruff character, and then Steven being more vulnerable, mild-mannered wimp, for lack of a better term. It's really cool to see him portray both, even like against himself. Like he's really acting against himself in a couple scenes, and it's really, really well done. We get more exposition of what the scarab, it's pointing to Amit's tomb. Arthur wants it because he wants to release Amit. And we have kind of then the conversation between Steven and Arthur that talk about that kind of pre-judgment, post-judgment, and kind of him coming to that realization that, okay, they're going to kill children.
Through his little thing that definitely is not a cult to have you with headphones on watching dolphins. Like...
Right. So, because like he kind of gives it the portrayal that, oh yeah, they're all coming together, they're learning, they're all about doing good, but also, hey, if your baby's born and in 30 years they're going to rob a place, well, bye baby, like, you know, you're dead. Like that's like, I really kind of like that he drew that type of analogy to it, rather than going, oh well, so if, you know, I've done nothing and tomorrow I go steal a piece of bread, like, even though I haven't stolen that piece of bread yet, you're going to kill me because I violated that judgment. Because even when we go back to episode 1, the old lady's been around forever, right? And when he judges her, you know, and the scales go against her, she's like, I've done nothing wrong. And he's like, well, you just haven't yet. And kills her, basically. Like, so it's one of those things where it's like, that's kind of harsh. Like, you know, you kill indiscriminately. And I mean, because he does like make a point, like Hitler, you know, right? So, but again, when Hitler was born, did Hitler know Hitler was going to do what Hitler was going to do? Like,
right.
It's one of those things where, yes, we can judge in retrospect and say, yeah, that should have happened, but without knowing that that would have happened, are you right in doing that? Or does that make you just as bad? And that's, I think, the core kind of argument that's coming between what Khonshu considers as justice versus Amit. And really is kind of what sets up that, you know, Amit's going to be kind of the bad guy we want to keep locked up.
The big bad,
versus actually releasing. And And then we also get what I'm going to coin. I mean, it's probably been already said, but I'm going to coin it here on the podcast. Gentleman Night. So when
Psycho Colonel Sam.
Yeah. So, Layla's telling him to summon the suit, and he's like, what do you mean? How do I summon the suit? And then he falls out the window and he's going, suit, hits the thing, gets back up, and he's wearing a
landing.
nice posh
fancy
suit.
Suit.
And even Mark's going, what the hell are we wearing? And again, it's like, it's kind of a really funny dynamic when he's trying to fight the Jackal, and he's trying to muster up that courage. He knows he's got some power now, but he's not really a fighter like Mark is. And just watching him kind of go at it with it was fantastic. And then when Mark takes over, we get the traditional suit and the more action hero.
Still waiting for the GIF or GIF, whatever. If anybody wants to send it my way, of his transformation to the Sailor Moon song, Sailor Moon transformations, Moon Knight. Just FYI, waiting for that.
I guess I could get working on that for you. But yeah, it's and then this is the first time and I think this was a good way to do it, right? So we get introduced with Steven for episode 1, and we get little inklings of Mark and a little idea of who Mark is. And then episode 2 still kind of continues to be Steven for most of it, with some feedback from Mark. But this is the point where it shifts, and now we're with Mark, and Steven is trapped and aware he's trapped on the other side of the mirror. Yeah. And now we're going to be stuck with Mark for an episode or two. And I think that's a really good way to kind of differentiate it, because now that Steven is aware that this is happening, I bet Steven is going to be more of a conscience to him than what he was allowing to kind of run away with as a mercenary in complete control.
Yeah, and we also understand a little more about Mark's motivations to not want to stop right now.
Yeah.
Because we see that Khonshu is looking at somebody that he does not want.
Well, they say it.
Well, yeah, I was just trying to keep spoilers for
well, fine.
anybody.
I'll keep my mouth shut. I might have,
I mean, we could give it. I just thought we'll keep some things for you to watch if you didn't.
Well, because I don't think it's really a spoiler yet. It's just showing that Khonshu is not
manipulating him.
Yeah, he's not as good as, we don't want to, yes, Amit is extremely bad, but Khonshu is not ultimately good either. But he's using kind of Layla as leverage to keep Mark doing it, because he's like, hey, you don't want her to become my puppet, so let me keep saying because I don't even think he has any intention necessarily of making her his successor, but knows Mark doesn't want that to happen. So,
but I think the episode also does a good job of showing that Khonshu can be getting annoyed with this Steven Mark thing.
Yeah.
And she also comes off as, she's pretty awesome, at least in the little bit that we've seen. And we know she's been on adventures and stuff and able to handle herself, so that she would be probably a good choice.
Yeah.
For next Avatar.
Right. I did like. I guess I really haven't said anything about it, but I did like the character of Layla. I really enjoy her, and I like her confusion as well, because that means she wasn't aware of this split in his psyche, and so when she's talking to him as Steven, she's like, oh yeah, you're just screwing with me, cut it out, come on, and once they're in the compound together, for lack of a better term, and she's like, come on, get the suit, and he's like, I don't know how to do it. That's when she comes to the realization that Steven is not just a fabrication. And it's a really interesting dynamic there as well. So yeah, very much have liked these 2 episodes. I'm really it's going to be one. Of course, now I'm on a 2-week vacation, so I can watch them as soon as they as soon as they come out. I'm really excited for the episodes and going to want to watch them as soon as possible each Wednesday now. Because I think everyone is bringing their A game. The story has me intrigued. Even because I know you had messaged me after the first episode and you're like, there's some things. And I after I
was like,
watched it,
I'm confused, but I feel like I'm supposed to be confused.
right, and that's where I was like, yeah, I just watched the episode. Like, that's they want you to be that way. So if you're going into this, you don't know anything about the character, and you're worried after watching episode 1 that you feel like you have no idea what's going on, you're meant to. Like,
this is, like you're right where you're supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. Don't think that you missed something. Don't think you had to do homework and read up on 6 years of Moon Knight lore to understand, or go and look at Marvel movies and look for the secret Easter eggs that explain everything that's going on here. I do hope as maybe a mid, so it'd actually probably be this next episode, but probably I'd say episode 4 to kind of break it up. I would like to kind of get a flashback episode to show them finding, whatever, and him coming and having the deal with Khonshu. Like, I do think you kind of need to show that. Don't have to spend too much time on it. Maybe not a whole episode, but I think you need to show it.
Just a few minutes.
Right. And again, like, to go back and answer kind of that question of when did the split happen? Was it before and he had a good handle on it? Or was it after and it's because he made the deal that all of a sudden he has the issue? I also am wondering if we're going to see any other different type of Moon Knight personalities or not. If we won't just get the fancy suit or the
fancy gentleman.
the gentleman knight. You heard it here first, folks. So if anyone else starts adopting it, they got it from me. Swear. I'm sure no one else has thought of that term. And his character I would actually really like to see in a crossover with Deadpool. I think that
would be hilarious.
Yeah, it would be a really, maybe like you don't even have to do a movie. Maybe do like a 4-episode miniseries.
A short.
Something like that.
At least a short.
Yeah, just do something with them. But ultimately, yeah, they've set up a really interesting mystery. I think they're doing the multiple personalities really well, and I'm excited for more. I'm really I see that this is listed as a limited series, which kind of makes me sad because I would like to see more seasons of this, or at least branch it into a movie. Like, don't just do one and done with this character and with Oscar Isaac, because I think they've really struck something really, really good here with this. Any other thoughts from you?
No, I was just thinking about first episodes of their show so far, and I'm just trying to kind of compare in my head, but I really do feel like this, I don't know if it's recency bias, but this one really does feel like the best one for an episode 1. Because, like, I'm thinking about WandaVision, and I think that I had excitement for that I could apply, but if I'm trying to think about the episode just comparatively, even if I think about it, episodes 1 and 2, the 2 black and white episodes, I don't know, like, those were really good, and then this one, Loki was good, but I don't know. Like, they're all really good. Not Winter Soldier.
Well,
maybe not
first episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier was fine.
But I'm putting a ranking in my head.
Right,
I'm kind of like.
But I'm by going kind of like off of what you're saying, and I'm going over it in my head too, as setting up a premise and setting up a mystery. I would have to agree, because WandaVision had its mystery kind of already set up for us, right? Like,
yeah, like, so that's excitement we're bringing to it.
Right. We already were just going, okay, we know Vision's here. How is Vision here? Why are they doing sitcoms? But the episode in of itself, outside of tiny, tiny little things, didn't really do anything to kind of go, okay, you need to know more of what's going on. Or here's how the overarching plot is potentially going to go, because it took its time with 9 episodes to slowly, once you got past episode 3 and 4, to start really kind of diving into its central mystery.
So like maybe Loki and this one.
Well,
not that the others were bad, they just don't rank up there for me.
So, and then with Loki, it's good, but again, it kind of doesn't. It just talks about the TVA, right? Like, it doesn't really talk about Kang or He Who Remains, because that again is something that happens about mid-season for it. That mystery really starts to unravel. Loki was more writing on, and I'm not saying they're wrong for doing this, but writing on Tom Hiddleston and the character of Loki. Like, that was the hype that kind of ran into that. Falcon and Winter Soldier, it was, okay, we want to see Sam become Cap and Bucky, you know, kind of along for the ride. But there wasn't really much of a mystery there either. It was just, okay, we're putting this character on the next step to their path. What if is what if. Like, that, I think that's of a different category that you can't really kind of throw that out there, at least until after Doctor Strange. But this one
is really good.
This one's unique because not only is it doing its mystery where no one knew what they were going to do with it, right? We just knew we were getting Moon Knight. Like, we didn't know, you know, who Ethan Hawke's character is. Well, I mean, probably if you read the comics, you know, but like, we don't know we didn't know what his thing was. We didn't know what they were going to do with the multiple personalities, because I wasn't even convinced that we were going to get Mark Spector. I thought they were going with the Stephen Grant and just going with that. Like, I didn't know that they were going to really adapt the multiple personality thing. So when you come into this episode, it just jumps you right into it. It starts, hey, this is Steven, mild manner, has a little bit of a weird setup at home. Then he wakes up in the Alps, and then you have the cult, and then you have him thinking it's all a dream, then realizing the goldfish has 2 fins instead of 1 fin, and then the museum scene. It's a lot better at kind of slowly introducing a new character and throwing you in the story with the character, because none of the other ones really were making you go feel what the character is feeling, right? Like, WandaVision was just WandaVision. Like, we were seeing it for Wanda and Vision. We wanted to see more of their relationship. But here's a character we don't know much of, at least within the MCU. Maybe you know him better out in the comic books. But we have the character himself of Stephen Grant not knowing anything and slowly learning it as the audience is learning it. And that's where this stands apart from all those shows. Like, we know the characters in the prior shows. We don't know who this character is. So hopefully this is a trend we'll see going with She-Hulk and with Ms. Marvel, and all the future shows where they're introducing the new characters. Because I really, when you said that, I was like thinking about it. I'm going, you're right. Like, this is the better of a premiere episode of introducing a new character, setting up its central plot, but also not trying to do too much with it as of right now. Well, you know, that's always reserves to change. Didn't happen with Falcon and Winter Soldier till about episode 3 or 4, so it could very well happen here. Maybe they get a little heavy-handed with the Egypt stuff later on, and you're really feeling lost. But so far, especially with the 2 episodes back to back in this review, I think they're doing just fine, and they're doing it really well. And again, maybe it's a little bias that I really like Oscar Isaac, but I really feel like the writing is crisp, the acting is spot on, and the cinematography is fantastic. So, you know, I really think it's more of the credits of what the individuals are doing than just me being a fan of Oscar Isaac. So, but that's a really good point to make up. I hadn't really thought of it.
Well, thank you.
Let's see.
No,
Any other topics?
You're talking about being a fan of Oscar Isaac. I was just thinking through, like, what have I seen him in previous, like, well, I was like other things, and I'm like, all the things I feel like I've seen him in more recently, I've liked him in, and all the things I feel like that are older, I'm like, I haven't really liked him that much. But it was mostly, he's usually, or playing a character that I was like, is a jerk, and I'm like, eh.
Are you referring to Sucker Punch?
Well, I'm trying to remember, and I saw Ex Machina and
Oh yeah, he's a bad guy in Ex Machina.
There was something else that I saw him in that was also like, and I'm like, I haven't really liked his characters except for like I like Poe, I like him in Dune, I like him in this. I'm like, okay, we're moving back in a better direction.
Yeah, he's a sleazeball in Sucker Punch. I mean, that's the first movie I know I had seen him in, and I was like, I'm never gonna like this actor because it wasn't a fault of him. He was just playing the sleazeball so well that like it made me dislike him.
Yeah, that's like the blessing and a curse. Like when people are like, "Well, I don't want to do, like Star Trek or Star Wars, I'll get typecast."
Yeah, it's
like, yeah, because if you do a really good job, then people kind of see you that way. And if you do a really good job and you're a crappy character, like think about like Joffrey, Game of Thrones, then people like have a difficult time separating that actor from the character and end up like hating you. But there are some actors I've seen in a role where just like the character themselves was just such a crap person that it's hard for me to like any other character that actor plays.
Cersei, Lena Headey, like, I loved her prior to Game of Thrones. Now after Game of Thrones, it's like, it's hard to watch her in something now. It's at no fault of her. It's actually more of a testament to her because she played Cersei so well and so despicably. And I mean, she really inhabited the character that it's like, you did too good of a job.
Right. And now I can't separate you.
Yeah, and it's like, again, because I made this joke on a prior podcast episode, and if you're Sean Bean, I'm expecting you to die. Like, it's just...
Yeah.
There's one show that he managed to survive dying, and that was... what was it called?
National Treasure.
No, not National Treasure. It was on Netflix. I gotta look it up.
Well, I was going to say he didn't die in that, as far as I know.
It was a kind of a Frankenstein show, and it'll be a mild spoiler for it, but it's old and it's it only had 2 seasons. But the Frankenstein Chronicles, okay, actually did it have 3? No, it had 2.
He didn't die in The Martian either.
Well, he dies at the end of season 1 of Frankenstein Chronicles. But he gets brought back to life. Hence the name. So, that's one of the few shows or a few things that I've seen him where he has survived. But there are those actors that have managed to really. I'm trying to think of other ones that kind of come to mind. The one who managed to always walk both lines really well is Christopher Lee. Because he could always play bad characters. I mean, he was Dracula in Hammer, Saruman, but then you'd also see him in other roles that I'm trying to. Of course, I can't think it all off the top of my head.
Didn't he play Sherlock Holmes once too?
I think he was Sherlock Holmes, and he was actually the inspiration for, like the way he looked at the time was the inspiration for Ian Fleming's 007. So like. Even though that was kind of Ian Fleming's own experience working with British Secret Service, the look and persona was based off of Christopher Lee. That's why I did see this one funny little bit of clip. I think it's from a special feature of Lord of the Rings, but it was Peter Jackson telling him how to react.
Oh yeah.
To getting stabbed in the back by Grima, and he stopped him and was like, "No," and he's like, "What do you mean no?" And he explained because he had done it when he had served in the military, and Peter Jackson's like, "Okay, I'm never questioning or giving you instruction again. You do what you need to do." So.
Yeah, that's in the special features. I don't know. I'm trying to think because I bought the special box extended editions every year when they came out, so I've had watched those special features that were in there. So I don't know if that's something recent that people got back on the internet or something, but I was like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I just saw it resurfacing just the other day. But okay, we haven't given our scores yet on this, but then we'll talk. We'll talk a little Doctor Strange news after this because we're still a little early, but let's see if we can drag this out to 8:00. Episode 1, 4.5.
It's a good opener.
You know,
yeah, it's a good
like,
opener. 4.5.
Even though maybe I'm giving half a point off just for that weird effect of the end scene when he's talking, because again, I don't think it's actually an issue. It's just the way that the mirrors are acting and how Oscar looks in the mirror. It's just a weird effect to my eyes visually. And episode 2, 4.5. Like, I mean,
yeah, like they're being pretty consistent.
Yeah, it's not really many issues to really pull apart. The only thing I can think of that I thought was a little odd was him getting out of the storage place just fine after like running around and weird stuff's happening, and like all of a sudden he's outside. I'm just like, it's a little hard for me to believe. But
well, when they did that like little freeze frame, that kind of felt like comic book panel to me, where he's like, you know, with the.
It was a little horror moment.
The case,
and then it was like, oh, I'm outside, and I'm like, that's not exactly what I expected, but yeah, pretty much
it's
like
a cut.
Yeah. So 4.5 out of both episodes for me. What about for you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
I feel like it's a really good opener so far. They haven't done anything that I'm like, about. So
it seems like it's going to be paced very well. They're introducing not too many plot points. They're not scared to do heavy exposition scenes and yet make it still very interesting so that you're not bored during them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's because I know you don't have much issues with this, but it's got me a little concerned. Let's talk a little Doctor Strange 2 news. So as
we have our tickets.
we both have our tickets, and we're actually almost seeing it at the exact same time, just 15 minutes difference.
Yeah, so the reminder to the people who don't know, we do live in different states.
This is true. Not far, but we do.
Not far, but
states.
Different states.
Pretty well, actually. Now we don't work in the same place anymore. So, so news came out. Doctor Strange 2, Multiverse of Madness is only going to be 2 hours long, and I know for most people that probably means nothing. For me, it gives me a little concern with what they're presenting as what they're trying to do with it. So again, I'll reserve judgment to after the film. We will do a podcast episode that Saturday talking about it. We haven't decided yet if we're going to do like what we did with the Batman, where we'll talk about the movie in general, talk about some other stuff, and then we'll do spoilers at the end. We'll wait to see. Probably will be how impactful and how good,
how much we have to say,
right? And like how big those spoilers should be. If those spoilers are monumental, I think maybe we won't, at least that week, just so everyone can kind of go in it fresh. But 2 hour runtime gives me a little bit of concern, but maybe it's confidence on their part that they feel like they can fit the entire story that they want to tell within 2 hours. And if that's the case, then hey.
I mean, it might be a really fast-paced moving 2 hours.
Right. Because I think about like Infinity War and Endgame, and I don't see those movies getting scrunched down to 2 hours, like without losing some substantial bits that I think are actually important. So it makes me wonder, like maybe how much is left on the cutting room floor, or if there was anything, because we've got the Illuminati we're going to deal with. We've got like 4 different Doctor Stranges that we're going to see in this. We got the rumors of all the different cameos. Actually, that'll be an image I'll see if I can bring up. Because there's speculation about who this one character might be, if it's going to be Monica or if it's going to be Superior Tony Stark.
I don't know. I don't know, because I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. If we set a precedent for like, oh, any movie that feels like it's going to be a big thing's got to be up to at least 3 hours or closer there. Like, maybe it should be 2.5 hours. I don't want them to feel like they constantly have to do long movies. You know what I mean?
Oh, I 100% agree with that. It's like when you look at No Way Home in context of its runtime, it feels like they knew that they had to tell it within 2.5 hours, and it feels adequate for the story they told. As for this, that's the thing. Like, this is kind of prejudging it right now. Man, I found the image when I clicked on video, but not so much when let's see. That like it's just one of those things where you're like, you know, without knowing the movie and being able to tell that the 2 hours fits it perfectly fine. That's where I got that like apprehension, because I just don't want them to try so many different plot lines and storylines.
Yeah, the only worry I would say, if it's even a worry right now that I would have about it, is that what's the character, America Chavez?
Yeah.
Her character, I feel like I'm slightly worried we'll get the Shaft, because we see a lot, like you said, there's going to be cameos, there's going to be all these multiple Doctor Strange, there's going to be Wanda, that I'm kind of like, honestly kind of thinking, do we even need her? Like, or should she have been introduced in a show?
So,
depending on whatever that she's going to be doing here, you know, it's kind of like, you know,
right.
Again, introducing a new character in a movie when you got all this other stuff you got to do. Maybe there'll be enough time for us to get to know and care about her. Maybe there won't. You know.
So, yeah, because so I think they're primarily going to use her based off of her power set, which was, because I know you didn't want to necessarily look it up, but I looked it up because even she's a character that was kind of getting introduced as I was stopping on my collection. Gosh, I wish I could just pull that image, but you guys don't want me to find that image. You just want me to pull up YouTube videos. But I think that they'll do enough to the extent that we'll get an idea of her power set, who she is, what importance she's going to play, but also not do enough to kind of tell us all what she's about, and maybe leave more explanation of who she is to
a later show,
to a show, or to a solo movie even. Now I'm trying to see if I can pull it up in the
if you can find it in the trailer.
It's driving me nuts. But yeah, because like we even see spoiler if you haven't seen the latest trailer, but we do see Wanda's kids again. So this is directly coming from the end of WandaVision, and kind of that when she hears the voice and she goes kind of running off, like that's going to have a huge play into this as well. So I'm really, again, I'm just kind of like intrigued. If you're going to have all these cameos and you're going to have all these characters, how do you fit that in 2 hours? I'm not saying you can't, but how? Because we even know that he's going to end up in the animated universe, I think, as they're going through the different multiverses. So it's, and I think we're going to see him going up against, oh, here it is.
Yeah, to back it up a little bit. Yeah, could be fast.
Okay, well that's about as good as we're going to get it.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I think it might be Monica.
Well, I would say possibly, and this may not even be the exact same image.
But maybe not, because part of me is just thinking about, well, she's not supposed to come back until the Marvels movie.
Right.
So I don't know if they'll bring her back or not, like in something like this. But it wouldn't be totally out of character because she just got her powers basically from Wanda.
Right. So it's one of those things where it's like, you got a lot going on here.
Yeah.
And I think they even said that like zombie, because we see here zombie Strange, that even zombie Wanda is going to be making an appearance from the last little. Maybe that's where I can find it. If I find the Dreams trailer, there might be a better image of that. But yeah, it's just one of those things where you got a lot you're doing in here, and it's just you're gonna possibly. It's the same problem that Spider-Man 3 had, and then Spider-Man 2 was that they had too many villains. I'll just wait till let's see if it pops up here. Too many villains and not enough time to fully flesh them out and introduce them and make them have an impact on the actual story. And that's what kind of concerns me on this is, okay, yeah, it might be really flashy. It might have some really cool cameos. Looks like we'll see a different Dr. Christine, or maybe it's the same Dr. Christine. But like, it's gonna be it's gonna be really there. There it is. That's a better that's a better look at it. Let's see if I can. So see, that's where it doesn't look like a woman necessarily, and they look.
I don't know, the curve of the hips.
Oh, maybe it is. Maybe it's Captain Marvel. I mean,
yeah,
because they look white.
The head, yeah, but that could all just be effects.
True.
That are on it. But the fact that, like, I'd say the curve of the hip.
Yeah, I can see.
And then there looks like a belt sash thing that like Captain Marvel's worn in some of her stuff.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, it's like
and Monica's hair could be braided up into a faux hawk.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like everyone has been speculating about who's that character is.
To me, it looks more like it's either going to be Monica or Carol.
Yeah.
Or whatever their universe's version.
Their multiversal counterparts. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you got a lot going on here.
Yeah, that's why that's for me. It's about characters because it's like as Chavez, she's gonna get like 5 minutes on screen, like because it just feels like to me all the other interesting stuff is going on with Wanda and her kids and Doctor Strange and all that's happening there. Like, who is this little character and do we even need her? I mean, I might fall in love with her in the movie. Who knows?
Right. I have a feeling that she's going to be the one to come to tell Strange that something's wrong. She searches out him. So much like he's the kind of the first one to know that something's wrong after Peter's spell. I mean, granted, Peter like finds out, but he encounters the lizard first, right?
Right.
That there maybe it's something to that extent that who knows? Again, well, thankfully we have like a month, less than a month till the movie comes out. So unless I die in some catastrophic accident, I'm going to know before too long.
You've just jinxed yourself. You put it out into the universe now.
Well, maybe one of my variants will get to watch it. So, or out there in the multiverse, who knows? I also hope that this will be our first, and I mean like post-credit scene or mid-credit scene, our first glimpse at Kang.
Doing something.
Yeah, just that kind of you do, even if you kind of emulate Avengers, where you just have the quick look and grin type thing. Like he doesn't have to be doing much. He could be just monitoring the timelines, but give us a little bit of a glimpse there, because we still got a little bit of ways before Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Because that's like on the
Thor. Well, I think the next after is Thor: Love and Thunder,
and then I think Black Panther 2 is after that, and then I think that's when Ant-Man. They're 2023. I know that much for sure. So we've got a ways before we get to the official introduction of Kang, but this is the time. Like, it didn't need to be in Spider-Man, but with Doctor Strange, this is where you start really introducing him,
Yeah,
especially
building it up.
Especially if people aren't watching the shows and don't know about He Who Remains and the bigger connections that has to everything. So, let's see. Are there any other topics?
Did you watch the trailer for Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Yes, I have seen the trailer. Yes, I know you want to cover it. I've got some thoughts on that movie. I haven't seen it yet, so let me be clear. I've seen the trailer. I like Michelle Yeoh. I love Michelle Yeoh, so that's not even the issue. I wasn't a huge fan of the trailer. We'll pull it up here for those watching here on YouTube. What's Everything
Everywhere All at Once? There you go.
I just needed to type that much. It's A24, and A24 right now for me is a little bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes they do really good movies, and sometimes they try too hard. Primarily with their horror, so not necessarily science fiction, but it's dealing with the concept of a multiverse, and her kind of learning different abilities from all the different hers out there. I like that movie better when it was called The One with Jet Li. So maybe that's why I'm having a little issues with this film and whether or not I would like it. I would say the shorter trailer that they play like before some YouTube videos that's like a lot more condensed is a lot more interesting than what I'm seeing so far on this one, because I haven't watched the full trailer. Okay.
I've just watched the shorter piece.
Yeah, so she kind of gets contacted by one of her others or something like that, and she starts managing to make connections to the others to learn all of their different skills. And techniques. And yeah, I like batshit crazy movies, but this looks almost too batshit crazy for me. I have no doubt that she is really good in this movie. I like I said, I love Michelle Yeoh. She was one of the better parts of Discovery season 1 and 2. Like, she was one of those shining lights. But this, I just think like someone was on too much LSD and decided they wanted to make it into a movie. And yeah, I like that. Like the wobbly like what are the wobbly fingers, right? It's like I like the idea of someone who feels like they have nothing going for them, that they're not good at anything, and then they learn about all of these other thems and they start learning all of these different abilities, and they really start kind of realizing their own potential should speak to me. But in the googly eye, like, yeah.
That's why I said let's wait till it's on a streaming service.
Oh, of course.
And watch it.
We'll cover it. Absolutely. We'll cover it. I'll watch it. Because it could be the best movie. Who knows? I mean, it's very possible. That's the first trailer I watched too. So
see, the first trailer I watched was just the shortened. I mean, it's not like a 30-second. It's like a 40-second, 45, right, something like that second trailer. That's a little more action packed, I guess, focused and not as drawn out as that one.
Right. So it's like when you that's the story trailer. So that's the one to kind of set you up on everything versus the one to go, oh, that's got really cool action sequences. So
well, yeah, that says, critics are raving.
Right. And A24 is one of the studios that they started out really good. In my opinion, like they were making more kind of art housey films, but also being really good with their genre. Like The Witch, the Robert Eggers film. The Witch is fantastic, and it's a true horror film. Like, it's more of a period piece, but it's a true horror film. When you get to something like Hereditary, you're starting to kind of cross the line a little bit, although it does manage to still be horror. And Midsommar still manages to be horror. But then you get to something like Oh gosh, what was it? I'm trying to remember now. Now I gotta pull it up. Now it's gonna bug me. A list of A24 films, because there's some movies that they've done. Oh, I must have switched over here. Wasn't intending to do that. Let's see. I'm trying to see if I can find it. I know, like, Ghost Story was odd. Ex Machina is an A24 movie, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's fantastic sci-fi. The Witch, that's good. Green. Oh, I didn't even remember that. Okay, Leslie, I'm gonna change. You won't watch this movie because it's horror, but it's real life horror. I'll even read you the description. But if you want we were talking about actors playing roles so well that they kind of get stuck in that role a little bit, or you can't distinguish them in anything else. You want to see Patrick Stewart play so against his typical character. Watch Green Room. The premise of Green Room is a punk band finds themselves attacked by neo-Nazi skinheads after witnessing a murder at a remote club. Patrick Stewart is the neo-Nazi leader. And he's fantastic. He's really good in it. But it was one where you're just like, okay, that's not typical.
Doesn't feel right. Yeah.
Let's see, man. I'm trying to. It Comes at Night wasn't as much as that one tries to portray itself as a horror film. Wasn't. I liked it, but it really wasn't horror. Ghost Story was just a weird love story. Hereditary is one I never liked. I got to rewatch it, but it did such a poor job of. It could have been so much more than what it ended up being that would have made it so much better. But Midsummer was Ari Aster's follow-up, and that was a lot better. Lighthouse is fantastic. Maybe I'm wrong. I could have sworn there was some movie that they did that they tried to portray it as horror, and it wasn't really horror. But as I'm looking through it, I don't see it. Maybe I am thinking of Hereditary. That could be it. But something like The Lighthouse is really good. It's elevated horror. So let's call it that. It's elevated horror, where it wants to be more art house, philosophical. Because I will say something like The Lighthouse is actually very philosophical, but also kind of tied to Lovecraftian horror, and it was what told me that Robert Pattinson could potentially be a good Batman, because that was like one of the first, outside of Harry Potter, movies that I actually sat down and watched him in, outside of Tenet, where I'm like, okay, this movie will show me if he is a serious actor or not. And boy, did he not disappoint in The Lighthouse. And Willem Dafoe was fantastic in that movie as well. But yeah, that's A24 is just one of those studios that's trying to be niche, but also be accessible. And I don't really think that their movies are. It's like kind of like Criterion. Criterion's more of the older films, film history, classic films. And A24 is trying to be like that, but also be intellectual. And sometimes a movie just much like this was always. I don't know about you. This is getting way off topic, but I don't know if this ever bothered you in school or not. But when an English teacher would assign a reading and go, "What is the deep underlying message that the author is trying to make his audience understand?" And you read it and you're like, the tree's a tree. Like, it's not a symbol for man's struggle against time or something like that. You know, did you ever?
Yeah, well, the thing that always got me with that sort of stuff was that they would be like, and there's no wrong answers, but then tell me my answer is wrong. You know, or the fact that they like assign something like that to every single, because the author wouldn't have written it if it didn't mean something.
Right.
And sometimes it's like, well, the author's just trying to paint you a picture of what the scene looks like. It doesn't have to be. Maybe they just want you to feel like it's a chilly winter morning, not necessarily that like society's in a downfall or something. Or
right, like take Lord of the Rings for example. Like Lord of the Rings is technically like an analogy or a metaphor of World War II, right? But Tolkien only kind of used the events to help shape the world he was telling. He wasn't directly going, yes, and the hobbits are the U.S. who came, and the ring is the nuclear bomb dropped on, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Sauron is the leader of the Axis and all that stuff. Like, no, it's just he let those influences kind of permeate in his head, and he decided how to create a fantasy world from that, and then tell a fantasy story that has some relations to it. I think really when you only get to like poetry is really when like an author is trying necessarily to convey a message or a philosophy,
a feeling or emotion. Yeah.
And it's changed in writing today because now everything has to have a message and everything has to have a meaning, which is part of the problem. It's like Star Trek Discovery, more specifically than Picard, has to bring up the issue of characters having they them pronouns rather than just instead of it being organic and part of the story, they had to force it. Like instead of having the planet where there's really no genders and stuff like that,
like they did in Next Generation.
Right. Like that's when you have an actual like clever writer and a better writer is when they can do that without having to beat it over your head and have a character lecture you about well, no, my pronouns are they them, and if you say this, then or the reason I won't interrupt you is because I'm too timid and I can't stand up for myself. Like that's when you're kind of crossing that line of telling a story that has a meaning and then a meaning that you're trying to tell a story with, right? But that's kind of like what A24 I feel like is with some of their movies, where it's like, well, someone can watch The Lighthouse and talk about how it's the metaphor for the working man and their struggle as a lighthouse watcher or something, and mania that isolation caused and stuff like that. Like, it's sometimes a lighthouse is a lighthouse, right? Like, it always kind of bothered me in school when they're like, no, the author clearly had a message here. Well, what if they didn't? Like, how do you know the author intended? Like, instead, if the author came out and said, yes.
Especially because most of the stuff that we would read is the author's already dead.
Right.
So.
Like, Grapes of Wrath.
It's not like they can.
Like, of course, Grapes of Wrath is about the Depression, right? So, yeah, I know what the author's trying to convey by the Grapes of Wrath. Catcher in the Rye is about growing up and not wanting to be an adult, right? Like, well, that's oversimplification, but that's kind of the gist. It's not everything needs to have a meaning. Not everything. Let's take Moon Knight for example, because I saw this headline, and unless this comes into play later, I don't see how or even why it should, because I don't care. I'm already interested in the show. The headline was let me pull it up because I do have it screenshot. And it's fine that they believe this, but at the same time, it's like this is a character in a fictional world dressing up in a cape. Like, Moon Knight's Jewishness plays an integral role in his origins. And so far, within Moon Knight, in these first 2 episodes,
I had no idea.
Right. They've not even talked about him being Jewish. They've never, not that there's anything wrong with that, but like,
right.
That's not a defining characteristic of his character, right? Like, I'm more interested in the fact that he is a mercenary with DID and who talks to a bird's call. You know, I'm more interested in the story that they're actually telling versus the real life characteristics of who he's supposed to represent, or what group he's supposed to represent. Like, that's when you start hurting something, right? Is when you start forcing that lens, when you start putting the lens of politics and of the real world into your fictional realities without it actually having an impact. Again, Star Trek is the only show, and I'll even throw Stargate in there because Stargate was really good at doing it too, that managed to teach lessons to its audience without ever lecturing. Maybe that was different at the time because I was young enough to maybe not know that maybe I was being lectured to. But I've watched DS9 several times as an adult and never felt once. And there are a lot of episodes that are that are about xenophobia, about race, about gender. Heck, the whole
religion,
episode, the Ferengi with the women, you know, women couldn't do anything, and then all of a sudden you find out that Quark's mom is basically running the whole Ferengi empire and stuff like that. And it's like, that's funny, and it's a good way to talk about gender differences and stuff like that. But never did it feel like, yes, you need to accept this message. It's going, no, let's put this in a funny story, and let's hope our audience can take something away with it. And that's why I say Star Trek it's not currently, was the gold standard at pushing through messaging without making you feel bad if you didn't agree with it, or just try to make you feel bad. Whereas I think a lot of programming nowadays tries to just make you feel bad for something. You know, it's, hey, if you like it, you like it. I mean, at the end of the day, all I want from any writer is just to write a good story. That's all I want. I don't know if I think I've talked about it with you. I know I've talked about it with some other people, and I might have mentioned it up on the podcast one time before. But there was a book, young adult books, and yes, I still read young adult books because sometimes those stories I find interesting. Just because they're young adult doesn't mean an adult can't read them. And it was a horror related series. It's called Asylum. It was a 3-book trilogy, and then it got a prequel book. Loved all 3 books of the original trilogy. There was even a gay character in the book. I really liked the character. Never once felt like it was forced. Seemed completely organic to the story. You get to the prequel book, and the prequel book, in my opinion, was the worst book she ever wrote. And it was because she tried to force things in there. She tried to force some trans issues in there where a character was wanting to be trans, you know, was a man believing they were a girl, and nothing wrong with that. You know, as long as you're an adult, just don't do anything to young children. That's my opinion on that. That's my opinion only. Leslie, feel free to keep your mouth shut if you want to. I'll get myself in trouble for it. But, you know, I have no problem with what an adult wants to do with their life. And the character was probably in 16, 17, so old enough. You know, and of course this was set in the 70s or 60s or 70s. So of course it would be really out of line for a person at that time to consider themselves trans. But the character never hit home to me. Like, it felt so forced. It felt so much like an agenda that they were trying to push this, that the writer themselves was trying to push this particular narrative and preach to me, person who's read her other books, or their other books rather. I don't know what their pronouns are. But I finished it. It was okay, but like, it was just one of those things where it was like, you did it well with your first book or your first, 3 books, but you just didn't manage to do it right here. So when you start taking something like that headline was from IGN, like that was straight up from them. And I'm going, okay, maybe put an editorial in front of that, because that's a person's personal beliefs on it, right? Like, and that's fine. They can have those personal beliefs, but not everyone's going to watch this unless it becomes something super important to the story. And I get they're probably going back to the actual history because, you know, Jewish people were used as slaves by Egyptians to build pyramids and stuff like that. So, you know, you're going back to actual, you know, Egyptian history. But so far as we know, Steve, Mark, we don't know if they're technically Egyptian. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, and unless they were like, maybe that editorial was talking about something in the comics, because like I said, I'm the only thing that I know about this character is what I'm learning through the show. I know nothing else about him.
If I remember correctly, and I'm looking it up as we speak, so I'm going to break your rule, but I am curious, and I'm looking more in the comics necessarily than the. I'm just trying to see if they say something about his ethnicity, because usually they have that in the side here, but I'm not seeing it. Abilities, aliases, team affiliations, alter ego. It looks like he does have about 4 total personalities. Don't know if we'll see those or not. Let's see. Okay, he is Jewish in the comics. I see it right there. Son of a rabbi. That's fine, right?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
and
that's
remember
something we haven't
still.
explored
Yeah,
yet.
I was gonna say, remember still that just because that's what's in the comics does not mean that's what they're gonna bring to the screen, to the MCU version of something.
Right, and even if it does, that's fine. In my opinion, though, the things that are kind of defining him as a character is he was a Marine who was a CIA operative, and who became a mercenary, right? So, like, those are the things that leap out to me, not necessarily where he came from. It's like the thing that sticks out to me about T'Challa is he's Black Panther. He's the son of a king. Like, he lives in Wakanda, and, you know, nothing else about anything else about him necessarily has to impact my thoughts of him as, well, because he's African. Okay, well, that's the defining characteristic. Well, no, I mean, he just happens to be African, but he's got all these other things that I think that apply more to him as a character than just the fact that he's African. Much like with Mark, okay, he's Jewish, but he's much more than just Jewish. Like, again,
Yeah, I mean,
Marine
are they going
CIA
to bring that to him in the MCU?
Right. So maybe they were specifically just talking about the comics, which, okay, that's fine. Like, then maybe I don't have as much of an issue with it. But it's just one of those things where it's like, don't put what you believe should necessarily be on the character. Just let the character be, and people will learn to come and accept them. I mean, do you know of anybody who hates Black Panther as a character? I certainly don't. I mean, maybe there's probably people who aren't even comic book fans that might not, but, like, he's a beloved character. I go to this, like, yes, Peter Parker is my Spider-Man, because he's always been my Spider-Man. But Miles Morales is my nephew, Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's completely fine. I like the character of Miles. I loved Into the Spider-Verse. I love him in the video games. I've loved him in the comics. And again, that's where, okay, so that's actually, because I'm rambling now, and we're at our time, but I'll finish on this thought, and then we'll call it a night. That's where they used a character's background and ethnicity, but they used it, I think, rightfully. Of course, he's mixed. I gotta pull it up so I don't label it or misidentify it. I believe Puerto Rican. African American and Puerto Rican. And kind of, you know, not well financially, and wins a part of the, like, school lottery to get into the really good school. that's stuff that they put in there that actually like played a lot into his character, and doesn't define Miles necessarily, but they were able to do it, and just like even here, even if it was a thing of trying to be politically correct, well, it backfired because everyone liked him. Like he's not a character I know that people just hate because he's half Puerto Rican, half African American. Like they managed to write a compelling enough character that audience members were able to latch onto. And again, he's my nephew Spider-Man. If you ask him who Spider-Man is, he says it's Miles. And there's nothing wrong with that. So again, there's a way to do it. There's a way not to do it. Just try to write a good story. Write a good character. Sure, you can put those types of things in there, but as long as you're doing it well and doing it right, people won't mind. I mean, I think, and this is the advent of Twitter, right? And everyone's in their echo chambers. I think people forget that Twitter isn't real life, and that you're only the people you surround yourselves with are the open-minded ones, or in converse, are the only ones with closed minds. You know, a lot more people are more open-minded as long as they don't feel preached to. So, okay, I've done my ramble. I'm sure at some point I will get yelled at for saying the things I said. But just a reminder, if you stuck around with us this long, we are doing the giveaway. I also haven't been looking at the chat to see if anyone's been chatting. I don't think so. Nope.
Oh, I haven't had it pulled up.
And me either. Normally I've got it up on my phone, but was looking up too many things at the same time. But just as a reminder, if you're listening to this on replay and everything, if you're listening to it on audio only on iTunes, and yes, the prior episode will get uploaded on there eventually. I was lazy last time. We are giving a giveaway for a 4K digital copy of Spider-Man No Way Home. The winner will be announced either next week or the week after, just depending on if we do a live stream next week after Friday's celebration night. If we don't, you'll be on the next one. It'll give you just 2 weeks instead of 1 week. So to enter, you're going to have to comment on our live stream or on our video, share it out on the to anyone on your social medias or whatever, and leave us a comment in the below so we know who you are. And again, it's only for those in the States, because I do not believe that the code will work outside of the States. So there you go. You got the rules on how to enter, and I think that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you guys for joining. If you stuck around through my my rant, as I ought to do every now and then, I gotta have something that gets. I need to create a segment for our show called Patrick's Soapbox. Thank you again, Leslie, for joining. You've got some videos here, planned for the future. So nothing coming out long, but you're planning on doing some series of stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit of what you're going to do?
Possibly.
Well, again, it's a TBD.
Yeah. All of this is like way TBD, just because of, like you said, like work, the day job comes first. Right. So, of possibly just like doing, what did I say, Star Trek Discovery, mm-hmm. Because I mean that would be some, I guess I should say, in the format of more like a reactor channel from YouTube. But there's this big steep learning curve of like figuring out
editing stuff, putting it together,
trying not to get copyright strikes, mm-hmm. things like that, and putting it together. But I just had floated that idea because I know that we've mentioned it before, and I didn't know if anybody would be interested in watching me watch a show that I really I've not gotten past 4 episodes of because I haven't liked it.
I'll be really interested.
To see if my opinion changes, if it can get better. Just like that sort of a thing of possibly like breaking this up so that it's not just like a Saturday stream that you have to come watch, and then like you could do more of the video game things.
Yep.
But again, that's all just like brainstorming.
Yep, stuff we got in the works, because one of the things you and I, and we've talked about it here on the show before, was we want to get some more kind of pre-recorded videos out during the week to, kind of keep stuff out there going and draw people to the show.
And with the Patreon too, we thought about like me just continuing on watching Daredevil on my own, and just being able to have that out there, and then do like a condensed version for YouTube. Just like we're just floating around lots of ideas of trying not to have to rely so much on matching up schedules, because again, day jobs.
Yep. I mean, right now I won't know what that feels like, but I'll be back to it before too long. But
it's not going to be that long. You'll be back at the
2 weeks are going to go by so quick. It's going to be sad, because it's going to be like, oh man, I got to finally go back to work now. But for those, if you're interested, just like we said in the last one, I might have some life-changing things coming. I've got a new job that I'll be starting, and it's going to hopefully allow me to have some more money to reinvest in the show. I'm going to be reaching out to a couple people I know in a community that do overlays and stuff like that, so we can spruce up kind of the look of the show, so it's not just what we got currently, but I may be the tortoise at it, but we're improving. We're improving it bit by bit. At some point, I'll get a new board and all that stuff. I'm gonna probably try to get new editing software, but that's all stuff to come. But we're really excited for the future of the show and what we're gonna bring. So hey, as part of the giveaway, comment down below what you guys would like to see, some topics you'd like to hear from us, or some solo videos you'd like to see us discuss, and we'll look at doing a series of them. So
yeah, because right now a lot of things that seem to be popular on YouTube that people are reacting to is like stuff I've already watched,
right?
Or like thoroughly have watched like several times. So it's kind of like the thing is trying to think up like, well, what can I watch that, everybody's like, oh, they're doing all the Disney movies. Like, well, I've seen those, this would not be my first watch for things like that. So,
right. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of the podcast. Thank you all again for stopping by or catching this on replay or listening to the audio only when that goes up. We will talk to you guys next time once I get over here and do what I need to do.